Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Could be good afternoon. And welcome to the second edition of Data Minutes. My name, if you don't know who I am, is Will Velida. And very recently, as in this week, I've joined Microsoft working as a fast track engineer based here in New Zealand, focusing on Azure apps. In my previous roles, I've been a software engineer focusing on Azure integration technologies, and I've also been a Microsoft Data Platform MVP focusing on Azure Cosmos DB, which brings me to my talk today. Today, we're going to be talking about Chaos DB, which was a major security vulnerability with Azure Cosmos DB. And in this talk, I'll explain what it was, what risks were exposed due to the vulnerability, and how we as software engineers and data professionals can implement certain measures to ensure that our Cosmos DB accounts are secure and protected from these types of security vulnerabilities, all in 10 minutes or under. So first off, what was Chaos DB? So back in August 2021, researchers at Wiz.io discovered a critical vulnerability with Azure Cosmos DB that allowed remote takeover of Cosmos DB accounts. So essentially what this takeover would do is give attackers full admin access to Cosmos DB accounts without any authorization. So essentially, an malicious attacker could exploit a chain of vulnerabilities in the Jupyter Notebook feature of Cosmos DB, and then query information about the target Cosmos DB Jupyter Notebook. And doing this, the attacker could obtain the credentials for the Cosmos DB account, including the primary key. Now, for those of you who know a little bit about Azure Cosmos DB, once you get the primary key, you can do a wide range of destructive acts, such as viewing, modifying, or deleting data in the Cosmos DB account. You can also use this to provision resources in Azure Cosmos DB accounts. So you can provision multiple containers and databases within the account. And essentially, when you provision them, you can provision them to use or allocate millions of request units. So you can actually waste request units expenditure, which is can cost a lot of money, which is a highly destructive act and would have a high impact on your Cosmos DB environments and also your Azure bill expenditure. So when Wiz.io notified us of the issue, our security team took immediate action to fix the problem. Oh, is my screen on? No, okay. But it was found out that this exploit was actually exploitable for months, and the best assumption that Cosmos DB customers and users can make is assume that they've been exploited. The vulnerability impacted Cosmos DB accounts that had the Jupyter Notebook feature enabled, and for those accounts that had allowed access from external IP ranges, which can cover quite a lot of Cosmos DB accounts. But regardless of whether you've been affected or not, there are actions that we can take as software engineers and data professionals to ensure that our Cosmos DB accounts are secure from these types of attacks. So let's discuss them. So the first thing you can do, or the first thing you should do, sorry, is rotate your primary and secondary keys. So in every Cosmos DB account, you have two of these keys, and in terms of functionality, they do exactly the same thing. They're just two different keys that do the same thing. And we can rotate them using the portal or via the Azure CLI or PowerShell scripts. When you're doing this, you just need to be careful that any applications that are using either key to authenticate to your Cosmos DB account don't use a stale key and cause downtime or authentication issues when your application is trying to query your Cosmos DB data. So say you're using the primary key, what you can do is switch to the secondary key, rotate the primary one, and then when that's done, switch back and then rotate your secondary key. And that's one way you could implement a key rotation policy for your Cosmos DB keys. Just be mindful, though, that depending on the amount of data that's stored in your Cosmos DB account, this can be a long process. So just keep that in mind. Another way that you can actually secure access to your data, instead of using keys, is to use role-based access controls. So with this, you can authenticate data requests using Azure AD Identities and authenticate your data requests using role-based permissions. This is a better alternative than using keys at all, because here we're using Azure AD identities to authenticate. And then what we can do is we can provide those AD identities with permissions, which define what operations they can perform against our Cosmos DB account, rather than just having our applications using the full admin access key. So we can be a bit more granular in the way that we're actually authorizing our applications to perform certain operations against our Cosmos DB accounts. We can also achieve this using system-assigned managed identities to access our data on Cosmos DB. With this, we can assign permissions to Azure resources that access our data in Cosmos DB without having to manage credentials. And we can also use certificate-based authentication in situations where we're accessing our data in Cosmos DB from on-prem or virtual machine or applications that are hosted on virtual machines. We can also create users in Cosmos DB databases as well and provide them with necessary permissions. This type of access uses resource tokens, and this includes access to resources within your databases, such as containers, documents, attachments, stored procedures, triggers, and user-defined functions, all using resource tokens. So those are a couple of ways that we can actually secure access, secure our Cosmos DB environment when we're accessing our data. Another thing that we can do is we can also limit access from the network. By default, we can access our Azure Cosmos DB accounts from any source with requests that are accompanied by a valid authentication token. So this is not the most secure way that we can actually secure our data. So we need to implement some controls at the network layer to do this, to just tighten up our security. So the simplest thing we can do is provide IP access controls on our Cosmos DB accounts. So using IP access controls, we can supply a set of IP addresses or IP address ranges from which we can make calls from to our Cosmos DB account. So any requests from outside this list of IPs will be forbidden and return a 403 response. We can also combine this by securing our Cosmos DB accounts within a virtual network. So we can configure our accounts to allow only access from a specific subnet of a virtual network, and then we can enable a service endpoint to access Cosmos DB within that subnet in a VNet, and then traffic that's sent from that subnet to Cosmos DB is sent with the identity of the subnet and the virtual network. Once this is configured, any requests originating from outside the VNet will return a 403 response. And then finally, we can also use Azure Private Link to connect to our Azure Cosmos DB account via private endpoint. This private endpoint is a set of private IP addresses in a subnet within your virtual network. And with this, we can actually limit access to our Cosmos DB account over private IP addresses. With Private Link, we can combine this with NSG policies to reduce the risk of data exfiltration. So that was very quick. Thanks for listening. It's a lot to take in 10 minutes, I know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a few links in the chat that you can all check out to read a little bit more about securing your data in Cosmos DB, and I'll also drop it on my Twitter account as well. You don't have to follow me. I'll just put it there and you guys can just enjoy and consume as you will. So thank you all for attending. I hope you got something out of this session. And again, if you have any questions about this, do reach out to me on Twitter. Bear in mind, I am in New Zealand, so there might be a little bit of a delay in response time, depending on where you are in the world.